So my name's Greg. I'm the founder of Gluroo, and we've been building this for about 2 years now. It's important to note that even though I am here, I'm not the only person who's worked on Gluroo. I just have the privilege of talking to you today. So a bunch of us have worked on it over the last 2+ years. Our designer, data scientist, and chief medical advisor, we all are impacted by diabetes every day. You guys may know Dr. Rehan Lal from Stanford, who is our chief medical advisor, and he's probably set up as many people with loop as anybody in the world. So we're lucky to have him. But this is the team over the time. And of course, the most important, most valuable players are my son, who was 7 when he was diagnosed, and my wife, Jenny, who've been partners in testing everything that we've done and have contributed all kinds of ideas. And it's my son where the story starts. Back in February of 2020, as Joanne mentioned, at the start of the pandemic, he wasn't feeling great, went in and finger pricked a 481 with his PCP. We headed to the Stanford ER and learned about diabetes really fast. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our history with therapy, what we did over the years, because it really informed Gluroo. The best kind of treatment, the best supported features of Gluroo always were whatever we were doing in the early days. And so we evolved Gluroo along with the therapy that he was using. So, for the first 5 months or so, we were just learning the basics. We did get a CGM right away. We were doing MDI with syringes first and then pens, and really drinking from the fire hose, thinking a lot about how to manage diabetes. I did a project then very early on where I figured out how to reverse engineer a clock radio that projected on the ceiling and made the pretend temperature outside match his blood glucose number, so that 11.3 degrees Fahrenheit on my bedroom ceiling meant 113 micrograms per deciliter, using the Dexcom Follow APIs to get that number. I think we were using SugarMate at the time as well. So that was one of my first hacks. But after about 5-6 months, I was done thinking and really realized that I needed to start writing. I started writing up some of the ideas and started writing some code. And that was the beginning of Gluroo. So in August of 2020, I built a prototype one weekend and founded the company a week later after believing that there was something important here that I could do and a way that I could help. So we stayed on MDI until January of 2021, when we switched to the Omnipod Dash system, the 4th generation system from Insulet in January of 21. We had the app out in test flight and the Google Beta Play Store just a little bit later in 2021. In June, and we'd been using iOS for everything up till that point. In June, I switched our son to a full Android smartwatch that meant that he didn't need his phone at all. He only had to wear this watch and use his PDM for bolusing. And so that was Android, and we did that for a while in June. Finally, and then we had that Healthline coverage in December of 21. We did a little marketing push around there and got a whole bunch of people on our wait list at that point. And finally, in 2022, Rehan, our medical advisor, finally convinced me to try DIY loop using the DashPod support. I always thought that the Riley link and the orange links were a bit too janky for my tastes, but as the development branch had gotten good enough with the Dash pods that we were using anyway, it was an easy thing to try, and we did. And so we built the DIY loop integration. And this, of course, got us back to iOS. Of course, just a couple months after using DIY, the Omnipod 5 that we'd been waiting for finally came out. So we decided to give that a try. That switched us back to Android and a Samsung phone. I did a Diabetes Mind D-Data talk in June before the ADA conference in New Orleans. And then we finally got it in both app stores in July. So over this time, there's two things I want you to remember about this. One is we were switching back and forth between Android and iOS based on what other technologies were available to us. And two, we really, a lot of the testing of Gluroo in the early days when there were just a dozen or so people using it, a whole lot of the testing was whatever therapy we were doing. So the things that we were using are the things that really work very, very well in Gluroo, because it's only been in the last 2 months that we've been getting a lot of feedback from the community. So I'm going to tell a bit more about the product by going through some motivating observations that we had early on. And the first observation is that diabetes impacts all of us. Even though it was my son who had the disease, it was clear from the very beginning that it was a team sport. And we were managing his care as a group, right? It wasn't just for him to manage. This is what Gluroo looks like as you're setting up what we call your glue crew, the set of people that are working together to support the team. So as you onboard, you kind of can scan a QR code from one phone to the other. There's an Android phone on the left, iPhone on the right. You just then log in with whatever Apple or Google credential you want, and now you're in the Glue Crew and you have access to all the same information as everybody else in the Glue Crew. It works via email too, but it's not as fun to demo. Second observation follows sort of from the first and is underscored by that timeline I shared, the timeline of care. We switch back and forth between Android and iPhones based on products and our approach to managing diabetes at the time. So flexibility of platform really is essential. And Gluroo is cross-platform. We support iOS, Android, and the web, all three. And when I say cross-platform, it's not just that it's a single app that can run on any of these things. Again, it's designed for a team of caregivers. If mom has a Pixel 4, dad has a Samsung Galaxy phone, and kiddo's using an iPhone 8, that's fine. It all works. Your healthcare practitioner can be using the web interface on a laptop or an iPad, right? It all works seamlessly. The third observation is based on one of the emergent behaviors we had early on after the diagnosis. My wife and I found that we were using Facebook Messenger as a log of diabetes events. So we would use shorthand, like we would type things like 1SB 5 minutes ago, and that would mean that Jack's had a single starburst as an intervention snack, right? And so we were doing that, and as I started to talk to people, trying to, figure out what the product really should be in the world, we found that we were definitely not alone. Coordination of diabetes, especially for care of people that need assistance or supervision, like kids, it happens via messaging, right? This was something I saw everywhere. So Gluroo is built as a group messaging app, and it's not a logging app. But our secret sauce is the Gluroo. The Gluroo is this all-knowing, never forgets kangaroo that tracks everything relevant for diabetes care. He's following along with everything you do. This is where sometimes I get the question, huh? Like, why a kangaroo? What exactly? Well, it does make sense, and I'll explain it. So while I was earning my PhD, I did spend 3 months down under studying at Monash University near Melbourne, Australia. So I do have a certain appreciation for kangaroos. They're cute, and they're strong, assertive animals. They're a great animal, great model, great role model. But originally, Gluroo was a play on the word guru. Right? So we started with guru. You mind muting? Thank you. We started with guru, and I tried to change it to Gluroo, spelled like this, Gluru. And when I asked my kids how to spell it, they spelled it like this. And once I saw it written like that, I was like, oh, that reminds me of a kangaroo. And my wife had the same reaction, and that was how the name and the logo came to be. So Gluroo with 2 O's. The domain was cheaper too, so that was a plus. It was less expensive to buy that host name. The fourth and final observation I'll mention is that diabetes is a system problem, and it's hard. It's really about keeping a complex biological system in balance, as you guys well know. And when multiple people work together to manage balance in a complex system, sharing state is the name of the game. You got to do it well, you got to do it in real time. And that state synchronization is a fundamental part of what Gluroo does and how it differentiates itself. Now, I didn't introduce myself too well. Joanne gave a little bit of a background. When I first retired from Facebook, I started a consulting firm, and I made these business cards, kind of anachronistic. They were paper business cards in 2013 or so. But the ribbon along the right edge kind of reflected the history of my career. So I was at Duke for 4 years doing math and computer science and almost psychology as a third major. University of Washington, near where I had interned at Microsoft for 4 years for grad school. And then I worked at Google for a little over 6 years, and I worked at Facebook for a little over 4 years. And what's important about those times is that I was responsible for the Gmail team for part of my time at Google, and I was responsible for a bunch of things at Facebook, including Messenger for part of my time there. And those experiences certainly inspired Gluroo. So what is Gluroo? Okay. Well, when we got our first press coverage, the headline was this: the simplest and yet most comprehensive diabetes tool. And this is a dream headline for a product manager, right? The holy grail of designing a product is to handle everything it needs to while still remaining simple. Normally, simple and comprehensive are kind of a pick one proposition. You can't have both. But while I was delighted by this headline, I wasn't surprised, because that was part of the strategy from early on. Simple was the plan. And the way that we thought we would get there, and we think we've succeeded, but the way that we thought that we would get there was just by telling people, look, swap in Gluroo for your messaging app. You were using WeChat or you were using iMessage to talk among the people that care about the person with diabetes. Just use Gluroo as a replacement. If you're going to talk about diabetes, open up Gluroo. If you're going to chat with your other friends, open up your other app. It's fine. Swap in Gluroo, and it works like a messaging app. And we had to nail basic messaging 110% for this simple claim to hold. But we think that we did. I've helped teams do it before, and we could do it. So this is ending up what Gluroo looks like.
Gluroo, the collaborative diabetes logger that works like a chat app. A mother uses Gluroo on her Android phone to text with her daughter Anna, who has diabetes. Anna responds back from her iPhone to share details of her dinner with her mom and her whole Glue crew. The app understands Anna and updates to 65 grams of carbs now on board on everyone's phone. There's also a simple tap to enter UI that we'll highlight in another video. The conversation continues, and Anna logs her bolus insulin from 15 minutes earlier. So that log entry inserts at 7:20 p.m. and is added to the 0.3 units remaining from a bolus Gluroo is tracking from earlier in the day. Each entry gets saved with her current blood glucose level from her CGM. Gluroo. Worry less, live life more.
And that was our first teaser promotional video from back in December of 21, maybe late November, early December. The video shows things further along, but one of the first things that I layered on top of basic messaging was recording not just the timestamp, but also the blood glucose level of the person with diabetes. So here you can see along the right edge, at 12:31, my son was 68 with a flat trend line, and 15 minutes later, he was 49 trending down, and therefore logged some juice and took some juice, had some juice, right? So if you think, what's the obvious thing if you're managing a person with diabetes and you're chatting about them? That's context that you want with every single message sent and received. So that's what we put in there. Now, while messaging does help make the product feel simple upon first use, what Clayton Christensen called an extensible core, I had a strong conviction that it was also the right metaphor. Fundamentally, I believe that managing diabetes is about tracking and communicating the state of all things that influence blood sugar. So we didn't want to build around the log. The logs are stale and isolating notions, right? Messaging, especially when there are other people involved in the process of care, evokes a sense of audience, and it helps trigger our innate sense of being social and satisfies our social need to connect and communicate with others as we're tracking those relevant events. It makes it more motivating, more inspiring to do this work and this tedium around managing this condition. The lesson that having an audience increases engagement is something that was proven by Mark and my colleagues at Facebook and by Jack and his teams at Twitter and again by other companies like Gluroo that have copied those models since the social networking explosion in the late noughts. It is a fundamental part of how Gluroo works. Now the second part, being comprehensive, that's trickier to get right, especially while maintaining simplicity. And there's a fundamental rule that I teach junior product folks on my team is that your solution really needs to be 10x better than an entrenched alternative if you want people to change, want people to switch. So Gluroo needed to handle a lot of the tedium and workflows in managing diabetes. The key to making Gluroo more useful is that way that kangaroo listens in and the way that it understands what you're messaging. So when you type something like dose 2U for 45G, that's not just a message that everybody gets to see. Gluroo actually understands that that means 2 units of insulin were injected, put on board, and it knows that you'll have that in your system for 3.5 to 4 hours. And it also understands and is able to estimate an activity curve for the carb absorption of the 45 grams of carbs that you're announcing. Okay? And it can model those things for you, kind of like the way Loop does with a bolus that it gives you after you've announced some food. In some ways, Gluroo is like the pump for people that aren't using a pump, although we'll see it also integrates nicely with pumps. Now it does this through a natural language processing engine, or NLP engine. It's pretty powerful, and I'll talk more about it in a second, but for those of you who are going to glaze over when I talk about NLP and texting and language understanding and stuff like that, know that we also have a very simple to use tap to enter messaging solution as well. And they actually work hand in hand to help train you how to type these things, or you can use the action bar with the plus button if you want. I'll come back to the plus bar. I'm going to talk about the NLP stuff first. So this is what it looks like if you're trying to log insulin or food. On the left is a bunch of insulin bolus announcements and basal announcements. Any of these will work, as do a bunch of other variants. And on the right is a bunch of meal announcements. In each case, I was uninspired and just was always announcing 45 grams of something. Okay? So it's that easy. That's all you have to type. You literally can just type 45G to tell the system that there's going to be 45 grams of food being eaten, right? For speedy logging, it doesn't get much faster than that. For logging a low intervention, we copied the 1SB that Ginny and I would text each other back on Facebook Messenger. You can spell it out, you can write SB. Turned out that this is one of the important places where we allowed customization early on. Different families have different go-to intervention snacks, whether it's glucose tabs or whatever. So you can customize, and the language understanding will understand your terms as well, whatever you want them to be. You can log finger pricks. We integrate with the sensor beautifully. Works great, but sometimes your sensor doesn't work. Sometimes you're double checking the sensor, so you can log finger pricks. Another of these Gluroo specific settings is whether you're going to record in milligrams per deciliter or millimoles per liter. And logging exercise looks something like this. We kind of key off of the duration and a level of strenuousness, like medium or low or hard, to describe the exercise. Logging new devices is an interesting one. We understand things like new sensor. You can record the lot number of the sensor, the code if you are into restarting your Dexcom sensors. You record a new site, like when you're changing your infusion site or a patch pump. New transmitter, to record the transmitter in case you need to do something with the transmitter while it's still on a sensor and need the number written down. And in fact, new devices are so important, we made it work even better. Here I'm putting on a new sensor and want to record the lot number and code number, and it's done. Using the camera, we QR scanned those things faster than I could explain what the heck I was doing. It's that easy. Now, you saw in my motivating text with Jenny 1 starburst 5 minutes ago, and Gluroo supports things like that. So by default, when you log something, when you are logging something is the time that the entry is associated with. But oftentimes your entry time and the time of the action aren't actually one and the same. So our NLP engine understands relative and absolute times. And so a relative time in the past, you'd say something like 15 m ago or 15 minutes ago, or new sensor 2 hours ago. So this, if it's, it's 5:30 for me now, if I type this in now, it would record it at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, right? It would show in the history of the log. Trying to record something in the future, you can type in 15 minutes. If you're like planning to eat, maybe you're bolusing now and plan to eat in 15 minutes so that you've pre-bolused, so that the insulin activity curve and the carb activity curve match up better. Or you know that you're going to take a starburst, but it's not right now. Maybe you want to be really precise and record that it's 2 minutes from now. You can also record an exact time, 45 grams at 12, 45 grams at 9:40 a.m., whatever, yesterday, Monday. If you record a day of the week, it assumes you're going backwards, because going multiple days forward in time isn't a lot of use. Seems obviously useful to log the backward-facing stuff, but again, logging forward, you wouldn't necessarily want to go 2 days in the future, but I do go 1 day later in the future all the time. So, for example, every school morning, I enter my son's anticipated lunch at his planned lunchtime before he ever even leaves the house. So I'll pre-announce his 62-gram cheese pizza at 12:20 p.m., and that lets Gluroo provide a reminder 15 minutes in advance so that he can remember to pre-bolus for that meal. It works great. Now, I mentioned, even though messaging is simple, some of what I explained is more complicated extension of that core idea, and we provide a couple different ways, a couple different kinds of help along the way to help you learn. First off, there's real-time feedback on what the NLP engine thinks that you're saying. So in this video, watch first for the fork and knife indicating that Gluroo understands it's a meal announcement, and then watch the clock show up just to the right of where I'm typing, right there. That clock shows up to tell you that it's understood a time, and the fork and knife show that it's a meal. Does seem worthy of a celebration, doesn't it? We added that in recently to make it a little bit more fun every time our son enters a structured entry, and our users, especially younger kids, love that. The second way that we make training a little easier, make learning how to do this a little easier, is these training tips. So it's hard to read in the bottom because it's faded out due to the modal dialogue that's popped up. But I had just typed in, did you have 2 starbursts? So when that happens, the first time that happens, we pop up an explanation saying, hey, we don't treat that as an announcement of 2 starbursts, because that was a question, right? And we asked you to confirm that you understand, and then you can go about your time. This only happens the first time that you do it, but it helps you learn how different features interact with the system. Now, the reason that we care about the fidelity and correctness of this logging is because we believe that the information in the logs can be very useful. We've talked about the benefits of communicating among the Glue crew, but for example, the sensor changes that we've shown you before, they can come in really handy later on. One of our most popular features is the way that we automate the reporting of a failed sensor. So you can just pull down the Devices tab in the drop-down status, and you can see your sensor information, what code you entered, what lot you scanned off of the QR code, and just tap Report. It opens up the Dexcom form, pre-fills everything with the information that you need, and, Dexcom willing, you'll have a new sensor shipped to you in 6 seconds flat. You at least won't have to spend more than 6 seconds on it. They might take a day or two. This is great. I used to collect all the failed sensors and file 4 of them at a time because it just took too long. Now, I showed you the use of your camera for scanning QR codes and supplies, but sending photos is a really popular part of ordinary messaging. When I was working at Facebook, we all knew that the day every year that we had the most engagement from the Facebook community was the day after Halloween. Everybody was checking their friends' photos from the festivities of the prior night. Gluroo supports photos too. You simply tap that button in the bottom left there, and it opens up your camera viewfinder, and you take a picture. You can type in some notes if you want, or just send it. If you don't type in any notes, we make it easy to tag. We're running it through some image processing. We can recognize that it may be popcorn. You can tag popcorn and add that to the log, and it shows up on everybody's phone in real time, live. Okay? If you want, instead, you can scan the UPC code, and we recognize that that UPC code we should recognize that the UPC code is popcorn. And here it is, there it is. And you can send that, and it, again, shows up on both sides in a jiffy. The next feature I'll quickly highlight is inspired by my time at Google, which of course is synonymous with search. So one of the big benefits of a good record of historical behavior is to learn from our past so we can do better the next time. You can argue that this is what the entire discipline of history is about. So Gluroo makes it easy to say search for sushi. So we tap that search button in the top left, we type in our search term, hit the button, and now our Gluroo event log is just sushi. Shows the pictures from the past. See, there's from September, there's from October 4th, there's from May 8th. You can open up inline charting to see how well you did guesstimating your carbs and how well the insulin you bolused covered your carbs and so forth, so that maybe next time you give a little bit more or get a little bit less, trying to make it easier for everybody involved. Now, I promised saying a little bit more about tap-based logging. Typing logs is great once you get the hang of it, but sometimes a guided approach is easy, especially when you're learning. So we support tap-based logging too. The plus button there in the bottom left gets you started. And here we see Susie adding a carb entry. She's easily able to see and choose from recent meals. She can enter something new with as much or as little detail as she wants. And here's an example of her using a plus menu to enter an exercise. Right? She enters a duration with a couple taps and then provides extra details so that she and Gluroo can better understand how tennis with Bob, it looks like, affects her glucose levels. Right? That's the tap to enter UI. Here's a closer look, or a longer look at least, of the action menu. You can see in the top right there, the bolus and basal insulin is represented throughout Gluroo in shades of blue, and carbs are represented in shades of goldenrod and brown, yellowish, brownish goldenrod, right? Exercise is always that purple kind of color, and blood glucose is green or an alert color. Now, of course, no one's going to get everything right the first time they log something, so you can update and edit the log however you need to. We can select a message here by just long pressing on it, and you can update the text however you want. Here we're fixing a typo. Or on another message, we can just, if we want to change the time of that other message, we just swipe left, and that moved that time, that message to an earlier time. Okay, and we record that it happened 15 minutes earlier. Any member of the Glue Crew can edit and remove messages, and again, it's immediately synchronized across both of those devices, that iPhone on the right and that Android phone on the left that different people have in their pockets. It's just as important to understand that state synchronization that's happening isn't just for messages. Here, Sweetie on the left is looking at her Glue Crew member list, while her mom on the right edits her profile to set her preferred name to Terry. Watch the left after the right iPhone changes. You'll see it update there. See, now it's Terry. Her name updates on her child's phone just a moment after Terry finishes her edit. All of the shared state, not just messaging, all of the shared state in Gluroo works just like this. Now, if a device becomes disconnected so that the state is not being synchronized, we call attention to that fact. No internet connection, no network connection is perfect. And it's important to understand that you may be looking at stale data. So we make that situation very clear. Gluroo isn't for making medical decisions, but we do want to make sure folks understand when what they're looking at isn't the most recent data. Now, I have an annoying alert going off somewhere else. That is an X-strip alert because Gluroo alerts don't bother you. We don't have alerts. I'll get to that. Integrations. So no one's going to double enter logs. Okay, if you've typed in what you're eating to your OP5, you don't want to enter your bolus also. Hang on. Trying to figure out where that sound is coming from. You don't want to enter that in Gluroo again. Okay? So with the help of the community, we've been updating our integrations. And as I've shown you before, we already integrate with the G6 and the Libre 3. We also integrate with pumps, such as a bunch of open source tools like Loop, Android APS, Night Scout. We'll talk more about those in a minute. And a couple commercial solutions. We're not affiliated with any of these folks, but we work with the Dash system and the Omnipod 5 system from Insulet. Okay, so first one I'll talk about is Night Scout. It's a popular one. A lot of open source tools, including DIY Loop, use Night Scout. We support Night Scout by letting you just point Gluroo at a Night Scout backend, and everything you enter in Gluroo gets copied into that Night Scout backend, just like DIY Loop. You can point it at a Night Scout backend, and then you can use that to show your doctor, okay, here's my Night Scout reports, and it'll show all of the stuff that you entered in Gluroo. We think that Gluroo is the fastest way to enter stuff, especially if you're not using DIY Loop and you're just doing MDI or using a syringe or whatever. It'll all be in that Night Scout instance that you're hosting either on Heroku or T1Pal or any of the other services that let you host Night Scout. We think Night Scout rocks, but the brilliance of Night Scout wasn't the storage format of the data, but really it was the standardization of the programmatic API on top of the data. We use our own native format, and we actually create a Night Scout compatible API that lets Gluroo be the backend for lots of open source software. Anything that's built to talk that API will work with Gluroo. So this, unfortunately, as you know, Heroku's free tier is going away next month. And so you'll have to start paying for their hosting. So I recommend you either switch to T1Pal or start paying Heroku, or you can use Gluroo's Night Scout compatible API as a third alternative. This is sort of how we fit into the ecosystem, right? You can be, if you're using Night Scout in the middle there right now, you can just swap in the Gluroo backend, and things like Loop, X-strip, Loop Follow, all of those things just work. In addition, we provide our own web-based UI, right? And you get access to all of the Gluroo goodness, all of its direct UI as well, right? Now, how does this work for DIY Loop? Let's talk more about that, which is something I'm sure you guys are interested in. So this is exactly how we integrate with DIY Loop. The app knows how to write into Night Scout. DIY Loop already knows how to write into Night Scout, so we give it Gluroo's version of Night Scout and everything works. So here's how you set it up. You can see we're just selecting an insulin delivery mechanism of DIY Loop. Now it created our Night Scout instance, so to speak. It's not really a new Night Scout instance, it's just our API. We copy and paste that URL, that host name over here. We make up the host name, you don't get to pick. Copy the API secret over, paste it in, log in, and you're all set up. Okay, now the way that it then works, here we're using DIY Loop on the right on an iPhone. Once we hit save and deliver and confirm with Face ID, you'll see it show up in Gluroo on the left in real time almost immediately. It's important to note that this isn't polling, this is not DIY Loop writing to Night Scout on Heroku and then Gluroo sometime seconds or minutes later asking for that data. DIY Loop is directly talking to Gluroo servers, and we're updating the status in real time. It's much faster than the alternative. And we've tested this backend that's compatible with Nightscout to work with Loop Follow. John has worked closely with us to make sure that that works well. I'm a big fan of Loop Follow, and this is what it looks like. If you know that you only need to follow from iOS, great. Note that there is no web UI to Nightscout on Gluroo, though. It's just the backend. We have our own web UI, so you're not going to get exactly the same web-based interface, but it will support these different open source products. It works with John Fawcett's Sugar Pixel. It works with Nightwatch. We've had people internationally tested on Nightwatch and NightGuard. There's a couple of folks in France and Italy that are using it with the M5 stack IoT devices. And after seeing the demo a couple weeks ago, I did a quick proof of concept integration with voice triggering. So here we are logging a starburst.
Hot word, trigger a starburst for Jax.
And then it shows up in the Gluroo event log. Okay, and this just uses the API just like everything else that integrates with if this then that to do voice control for using Nightscout backend. Now, as I mentioned, we integrate with Omnipod 5 and the Omnipod 4 dash system. We've used both of them personally. We've dogfooded both of these integrations. The OP5 just came out, and it's worth noting that there's no manufacturer-supplied live remote monitoring solution for it. Their View app only works with the dash and only runs on iOS. So as far as I know, right now, Gluroo is the only solution available to see what's happening on an Omnipod 5 patch pump from a parent or caregiver's phone. So here's a demo.
On the right is Gluroo running on my son's Android phone connected to his patch pump. He's set the insulin delivery type to Omnipod 5, and I'm going to switch into the OP5 app running on that same phone and deliver a correction bolus. Insulet's app suggests just over half a unit. While that's happening, notice on the left I'm holding my iPhone also running Gluroo. My son, the cameraman, has all of his diabetes data, including supplies, meal announcements, photos, and more, synchronized across the phones of his entire Glue crew in real time, like a regular group messaging app. We jump ahead, and about 40 seconds after the bolus completes, Gluroo sends a notification to the iPhone and puts the insulin in the log on both devices, annotated with the time and his blood glucose of 155. The device status now has the updated insulin on board and shows OP5's automated versus limited mode and the battery level on his phone. Gluroo makes managing diabetes as easy as messaging.
So that's how it works with the OP5. So there's a couple of limitations. The big one for Omnipod 5 is that it only works for the insulin being bolused. So there's no carbs being logged. We can tell, we see all the insulin, whether it's on automatic bolus or a manual bolus, but there's no carbs logged, unfortunately. And it's an important limitation. We do have a way of working around that a little bit. So when we do see the insulin being delivered on the OP5, we add underneath an opportunity to log how many carbs we think it probably was based on your carb ratio, the CGM reading right now, and the insulin that we know is on board from our integration with the OP5. So we guesstimate somewhere in the vicinity of 75 grams and give you a bunch of choices and make it 2 taps to then log how many carbs you actually ate. You can, of course, enter more notes that it was 70 grams pizza or whatever, right? To answer Joanne's question, is insulin in talks with Gluroo for carbs? I would love you guys to encourage them to talk more with us. I have several connections there, and I think as Gluroo gains more audience, I think there's hope that we'll be able to get some of that working with a more official integration. But we don't have that yet. The second limitation with the OP5 is that it doesn't work with their PDM. You have to use your own compatible smartphone. The solution there isn't as satisfying. You do have to buy something. The good news is that something like this S10e is actually a nice small smartphone. It's couple generations back, but it works great with Gluroo, works great with the OP5 app, and considering the expense of diabetes isn't that expensive all told. We bought a refurbed one like this and it works great. Now, notifications is another important area where Gluroo has innovated. So every time you see these messages going in the app, they're also coming as operating system level notifications. So here you can see a bunch of things that were going on. And in fact, every time you get one of these, we try to have some interesting and useful responses so that you don't even have to open Gluroo to respond or to take action. Okay? Just by these in operating system notification responses and buttons. Now, our most important notifications are what we call reminders. This is an area that can confuse long timers as they start using Gluroo. They're looking for alerts. Okay? And we don't have alerts. Nobody likes alerts going off and interrupting them. I didn't like having to shut that alert off. That was an X-strip alert. Nobody likes interruptions. Gluroo aims to remind you about situations before it escalates into an alert. So we're trying to make a bunch of changes to the app to align the visuals and the language in the app with this vision for reminders, but I'll share a bit of how we think it works. Some of the language isn't quite up to date in the app that's available in production right now. So we don't have alerts, we have reminders. And I want to stress this isn't just wordsmithing, right? There are some big differences. An alert is something that you dismiss, and that's not how Gluroo works. Reminders are actionable, contextual, situational things that you need to address the root cause of. And when you've addressed the root cause of, the reminder becomes no longer necessary and it'll go away on its own. So here we see on the left a high reminder in the app where Gluroo shows that insulin and exercise are ways to address a high, and the user logs an insulin dose and the reminder goes away. You see it disappear right there for both of the users in the Glue Crew. All of the users will see it disappear. Okay? It wasn't an alert, it was a way of facilitating the logging of the corrective action. Now we really want to minimize those interruptions. I've talked about this before. And the difference between that X-strip alert that you heard bothering me and Gluroo's alert is I'm not with my son. So even though he needed to eat a Starburst, as it were, he was a little bit low, I didn't get a Gluroo alert because I wasn't close to him. His phone alerted him. His phone reminded him. With Gluroo, we remind only one person at a time. And we only buzz others if the reminder isn't addressed in a timely way. So I never got the Gluroo alert because he had taken a Starburst and logged the Starburst. It means it doesn't need to bother me. Now, I use follow and X-strip alerts as double, triple backups. I'm in my office, which is why I heard the other alert. But Gluroo wasn't the thing that was bothering me because he took care of himself. Gluroo helps train you as a person who needs support or assistance, helps train that person to take care of themselves while still providing the supervision and oversight. So here we see Sweetie on the left with a blood glucose of 71, and she gets a new sensor reading of 67, which triggers a low reminder on her device. See the notification at the top of the screen. More importantly, notice that there was not a notification sent to my iPhone on the right. The reminder inside the app shows on the iPhone, but without sound and only if the app is open. Now, during the first phase of this reminder, anyone in the Glue Crew can look at it, take action, but the in-app reminder lists only the things that are likely to be logged for low, in this case, the Starburst or juice. The device notification lets you log easily from outside the app. We can do it right there in that notification. But here we pretend that Sweetie didn't notice and we just wait. Now after 3 minutes, and I speed it up to a minute in this demo, my iPhone on the right gets that notification, there it is, and it buzzes for the reminder. And then from my iPhone, I could easily record the corrective action using one of those action menus on the iOS notification. That makes the reminder disappear from all the devices. I hope that makes sense. It's a fundamental difference in the way that this works. Now, you get lots of control around notifications. The operating system supports a ton. Android in particular, you can go crazy customizing this. You can control which reminders you get from your regular settings, as well as some additional controls inside Gluroo itself. Again, reminders are not just based on sensor value. Okay? This is confusing to folks. You might get a low alert because you're 90, going low, haven't recorded food, and just recorded an insulin bolus, and it looks like you need to be reminded that, hey, you could have a starburst to avoid going low. And hopefully that then prevents you from ever hearing the Dexcom alert. Okay, we do require that you continue using the manufacturer-supplied alerting system. Now, this is a work in progress. We continue to refine this from feedback from the community and from our own dog fooding and so forth. The one place where we do have an extension of regular alerts is for phone call alerts. This is a very popular SugarMate feature, and we do it too. You can specify a landline or whatever phone number you want to be a third level of escalation of an alert or a reminder, right? Now, a whole bunch of Gluroo's functionality is in the drop-down status tabs, and those look like this here. There's 4 tabs. Oops, let's go back. There's 4 tabs here. The first, I think it's going to start. I think there's a video here. No, well, here's 3 of the tabs. Let's not worry about that. This is more fun to look at. Bigger and more up to date. So on the leftmost tab shows your insulin on board, as well as a computation of just the algebra of insulin and carbs, showing you where we think you'll land upon completion. We've seen the device tab a little bit, so I've skipped that one. In the middle is the chart tab, and shows you your blood glucose levels as recorded by your CGM, with markers annotating grams of carbs or insulin boluses or whatever. If you're using DIY Loop, you'll see like your basal levels shown on the bottom, and you'll see auto boluses as varying size dots along the very top x-axis. There's a share button in there to make it really easy to share your chart with other people on Facebook or wherever you want to share, and so forth. And at the far right is a simple set of tiles for statistics. In the fullness of time, these will be customizable and so forth. But right now, this is the set that we make available. Okay. The menu also appears in the tray. That 5th sort of tab is the horizontal what we call in the trade the hamburger menu. And you can open the menu also by tapping the vertical dots menu just above the hamburger menu, where my smeared out face appears up there and my blurred face appears. Now the 3rd row of this menu tab gives you controls for tracking your prescription. I already talked a little bit before about how you can, how Gluroo uses your carb ratio to communicate, to let you estimate how many carbs you had for a given bolus. It's also a useful way of communicating with your endocrinologist and otherwise. So here is what recording your prescription looks like. You can day part your day to record different segments of the day where you have different carb ratios, targets, or insulin sensitivity factors. You just kind of directly manipulate in the table underneath. You can remove rows, add rows, whatever. And when you're all done making your changes, you can back out of that, and there we go. And it'll make sure that you want to save it. And then it provides a summary of the changes to the log so that you can remember what day it was that you updated your carb ratio or so forth. Gluroo does work, and this answers the most recent question, which is we work with care providers outside of your core family. Can't say we're marketing Gluroo at all. We're not yet commercially available, but we are looking for testers and endocrinologists, and especially pediatric endocrinologists, diabetes coaches, anybody that helps support people with diabetes. We're definitely interested in this. So the way that looks, this is what I call the school nurse use case. I know some of you, God bless you, support multiple kids with diabetes. If you have multiple loved ones or people you're supporting as a school nurse that hopefully you sort of at least like, you can switch among 6 or 8 of them even by just long pressing the picture of the person with diabetes in the top and then switching to somebody else. It actually kind of works like Facebook's new persona switcher, but we did this even before they did. And that's how you switch among different people who have diabetes. And then all the state just updates. If you want to share with your licensed care provider, you can grab a link and paste it into you can paste that into your hey Russ, make sure you're muted. And you can paste that into your patient care portal so that they can have access to your diabetes data. And they'll be able to look at a web application that looks something like this, right? It's a list of all of their patients, in this case just 2, right? And they have access to your ambulatory glucose profile. These are all charts that our data scientists put together. Walker put these together. They're the same kind of thing that they'd look at if they were looking at Clarity or whatever. So there's like a percentiles chart on the bottom. Here's like an hourly day of week chart for the last 7 days. The bottom one is a heat map. And the heat map's an interesting one. Walker made this, and I have his permission to share that it's also his data. You can see here, the only time he struggles with highs is Friday and Saturday night. But I'm sure he's having fun, so I bet it's worth it. The web app is mostly for folks outside of your core Glue crew, but there is a status chart view that I initially built for my family to replace the Night Scout web view that we used to use. This old LG Android phone sits in our main bathroom, and it just is constantly displaying that page, showing his current number and his last days of readings. So again, this is like trying to replace the Night Scout web UI, so you don't need the Night Scout web UI anymore. Gluroo is pretty thoroughly internationalized. And the question that Samantha asked, I'll answer that real quick. The others can see the data. Yeah, you can control you can let school nurses only see from 8:30 to 5 on Monday through Friday. That currently is a database only feature, but we'll be putting a user interface on it shortly. So right now you have to write in the help and we can set it up. But frankly, once somebody writes in the help and asks to do that, I'm just going to implement the feature. It'll just take me an hour or so. We're fully internationalized. We have folks from over a dozen countries using Gluroo already. We support these 10 languages. I guess technically 11 because of the translator pseudo language. But right now localization is done via machine translation, so it's not great. If you read the translation for the word right, sometimes it's translated to mean correct in another language when it's meant to be like the opposite of left. So there are problems that we need to fix there, and we're working out a way to enable the users in a country to help contribute proper translations for the app. And we actually have a couple people working directly on improving the Hindi translations to make the app easier to use in India. Now, engagement is an important thing for any app that's end user facing. We, in general, though, aim to have Gluroo maximize value without you spending a lot of time in the app. We do send emails to remind you about your blood glucose performance, so you can compare this prior week to the prior week and see how you're progressing. And for kids, I know we're having Happy Bob on in a couple weeks. Happy Bob's an awesome app that's very focused on this kind of gamification, and it is super fun and does a good job with that. Here is that menu again. That top right is a trophy case and a challenges screen. And if we look inside that, you can earn awards in Gluroo for various kinds of successes, for like making a lot of meal announcements or intervening with a snap. These are proven behavioral techniques to keep participation in the treatment high. And more than once, my son has exclaimed, "Hey, Dad, I got another trophy." Right? So it at least sort of works with him, right? He enjoys these. And you get fireworks when the trophies are given out and so forth. We've also got some exciting upcoming work in what we're calling challenge crews. You'll see more about that in the app over the next month or two. That's all part of a design to better support a broader mission around all kinds of diabetes and general health. For a younger adult who has type 1 or maybe an adult that's pre-diabetic, they may not have the same support crew as a younger child. So challenges are a way to engage a broader, their peers who maybe they collaborate with or talk to about their health challenges. So as part of challenge crews, we're working on allowing calorie tracking. If you don't take insulin, then maybe tracking calories is the thing that would be useful for you. And we're letting Gluroo do that for you. I think a UPC and nutrition database and the quality of that database is even more important for type 2s and prediabetes and for health and so forth. My screen is not happy. There we go. We're working on Health Kit integration. We've got a prototype of that. I've got one user helping me make that work well. Google Fit's working, a work in progress as well. And just ordered my Pixel Watch, and we're going to start making it work well with Pixel Watches and Apple Watches. Here's a chart of our users, groups, and messages over time. The main reason for pointing this out is, hey, the two marketing pushes we've done were the two bumps you see here in late November, early December. There's a big step function up of users and groups, mostly just not so much in messages because we were mostly just like waitlisting folks then. And then more recently in the mid-September push, we've seen a big takeoff, especially in France and Italy, have been massive amounts of new users. I love the idea of tying the rewards into allowance, so I'm all for it. Let's see. So marketing works, and then it's also important to note, and we like showing hockey stick curves in Silicon Valley whenever we tell people that we're hiring. So this is the requisite hockey stick curve of growth coupled with the message that we are hiring. Would love to have more engineers on the team. Would love to have a senior healthcare professional, go-to-market specialist. We already have millions of sensor readings, over 100,000 messages in the system. It's an exciting time. So now I will take questions. And I think I'll go in reverse order of chat, and then people, after I pick and choose some, people can like chime in and unmute themselves and ask more questions. I'm gonna make this chat window bigger so I can read backwards, and I'll try to repeat the question that I'm answering as I ask these. Okay, so Joanne, you asked, how long can you keep it free? We intend to keep the end user facing product free indefinitely. I have been very fortunate in my career, and I've been bootstrapping this product. I've turned down investment money, but have been bootstrapping to this point, and believe that we have other go-to-market strategies that won't require a premium payment model of any sort. At least there'll be all the features, all the meaningful features will be free indefinitely. We strongly hope. Marketing the pediatric. So there was a question, Samantha. You asked. This lets Loop write to GR. I assume that means Gluroo, but Gluroo is not writing back to Loop. Correct. Gluroo is. There's no writing back to Loop, right? Loop just pulls the Nightscout database. If you're asking, for instance, when we wouldn't want to necessarily tell, we treated a low. I'm not sure about the second part of the question, but we don't, for example, support remote bolusing or things like that, right? That's something I can't rule out in the future, but it's quite sensitive. Technically, we're not the ones doing it. It's Loop DIY doing it. But right now, we don't have a way in Gluroo to specify a different activity mode or something like that for Loop to read in. But it's important to understand that Gluroo isn't writing anywhere. Loop is just reading from Gluroo as if something else wrote in the Nightscout, but it's not really Nightscout, right? Let's see. Joanne, do you want to call attention to any of the other questions that came up that I might have missed?
No, I actually think you've done an amazing presentation. When you get to listen to it, you actually learn a lot. And I'm so sorry your son has diabetes, but as we've been saying in the background, you're the perfect person to be on this. So thank you very much for what you've done. Just a curiosity, this seems a brilliant thing for teens as
Yep.
they start to learn how to take care of themselves, but with monitoring from the parents. Um, is there any way that you offer little workshops, or what's the onboarding to learn this system? It, as you say, this sounds simple, and then I go away going, "What's first? What do I do next?"
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, my background is one where, like, I believe in scalable onboarding, right? When we built Gmail and released it on April Fool's Day in 2004, it wasn't like you signed up on a Calendly link to figure out how to use Gmail. We made the product good enough that you were supposed to be able to figure it out by using the product and so forth. And that's the same model for Gluroo. We do anticipate onboarding coaches, endocrinologists, and so forth, helping them understand. And that's kind of more the sort of enterprise sales model where you try to convince some of the people that influence broader swaths of folks. But we're hoping that it's self-explanatory, and we're hoping that we don't need to onboard. That said, over the last 2 years, I've onboarded 24 or so families and shown them how it works and so forth. So we have a playbook for doing that, but we're hoping it's not necessary. We're hoping that videos like this that are made available indefinitely online will replace the need to do anything like that.